Hello, Patriots. I'm Lee Watts, and this is Patriot Point, your source for Kentucky news and analysis from a conservative, Christian, and common sense point of view. Well, this week we have two big stories for you. First of all, how Kentucky now has school choice. Because of a new law which has been passed, we finally get school choice, but there's a catch. Of course there is. There's always a catch. We'll be explaining the details to you this week. Secondly, we're going to be talking about a party that Andy Beshear is throwing this weekend that no one seems to want to go to. I'm sure my invitation just must have got lost in the mail somewhere. But first of all, let's talk about school choice. This is something conservatives in Kentucky have been fighting for years. You may remember recently we had Amendment 2 on the ballot to try to get school choice in Kentucky. Well, a new law has been passed. It has been signed. It is in effect. And now we have school choice. What law is this, you might ask, Mr. Watts? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is part of the new law, the big, beautiful bill signed into law by President Trump this most recent Independence Day. President Trump has been a very outspoken supporter for school choice, expressing repeatedly concerns about kids trapped in failing schools just based on their zip code and their district, being forced to go to schools that they don't want, their parents don't want to send them to because of what's going on there, ideology being taught, but they didn't have any options or choices. Well, now they do. Here's how it works, and then I'll explain the catch. You may now donate up to $1,700 every single year to what is called a scholarship group and get a one-for-one tax credit on your federal taxes for this donation. So if you're looking for a tax deduction next year, this is it. Now, the way that you would qualify for this is the restrictions. You must earn, technically, you must earn under 300% of your area's median income based on the formula from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So let me explain this in plain English. This means you cannot make more than 3 times as much money as the other people in your neighborhood. If you earn more than 3 times as much money as the average other person in your neighborhood, you wouldn't qualify. So this means unless you're ridiculously wealthy, you're going to qualify for this. Probably 99.999% of Kentuckians who watch Patriot Point will qualify for this. Now, in years past, there's been a restriction under Kentucky law that has prevented school choice. And this is actually in the Kentucky Constitution. There's a provision in the Constitution of the state that prevents the state government from spending any state money on anything other than public education. That would prevent them funding any kind of private school at all. That's the reason we had to get Amendment 2 passed. But here is the loophole. This is not state money. This is federal money. Therefore, federal money is not restricted by the state constitution. Now, here's the catch, is that the law states that each one of the states is going to have their state government decide which group can actually receive this money. In the upcoming 2026 Kentucky legislative session of the General Assembly, they're going to have to come up with the process for how private schools, whether this is a secular school or a church school or maybe even a home school, could receive this money that has been donated through this federal program. Because under Kentucky law, home schools are defined as private schools. So there's a possibility the way they could work this out is if you're a homeschooler, you've got to buy your own books and all your materials that you would possibly use for schooling. You could donate this to your own homeschool, use that money to buy the things you use for homeschooling, and then take that off on your taxes. It's all going to depend on how the legislature sets up the process. After they set up the process, then whoever would qualify, whether it be a homeschool, secular school, church school, would have to apply to be part of this program to receive these funds which have been donated. So I think this is very exciting. We're going to really need to be in contact with your district's senator and representative up there in Frankfort to make sure that you have your voice heard. Make sure that we get the right kind of system set in place to receive these funds. So yes, we have school choice now in Kentucky. That's the way it works. The catch is the state's going to have to decide who gets the money and how. That's why we need to have our voices heard. Secondly, let's talk about how Andy Beshear is throwing a party this weekend. Yes, he seems to be throwing a birthday party for his wife, the First Lady of the Commonwealth, and I have no problem with that. Hope she has a very happy birthday. However, here's the catch with this one. It is a birthday party / fundraiser. I was discussing this with my wife, and she said if I was going to have a birthday party for her and also have it be a fundraiser for something I'm doing, that she would rather be upset about that. But yet, this is what's going on. And so, Andy, first, what is he raising money for and using his wife's birthday as an excuse? I have a very strong suspicion it is trying to raise funds for him trying to run for president. Now, here's the interesting part, is originally the people who were doing this were told, hey, you need to be prepared for 700 guests this weekend. However, just 2 or 3 days before the party, that number was changed to, it turns out maybe only about 100 people. I guess really the only people that excited about Andy Beshear running for president would be Andy Beshear. So yes, I think he's trying to run, but nobody seems to be very excited about that. He's using his wife's birthday as probably a fundraiser to try to do that. Before we sign off, I want to mention 2 things. First of all, last week I talked about some people who are entering the race to replace Mitch McConnell. I'm getting a great deal of information sent my way on this topic, on different people who are running and things about them, and we will be covering this in much greater detail in upcoming episodes as we get closer to the election. I also want to mention the anniversary of something. Today, as I'm posting this, makes the 1-year anniversary since I have written and released the book called Quest of the Dragon's Princess. It's an adventure romantic comedy that I'm sure that you would enjoy. It is available on Amazon. So that's the news that we have this week, Patriots. So until next week, I'm Lee Watts for Patriot Point, reminding you that liberty is not a spectator sport.